This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com, and tonight I am going to review one of the most infamous backstage fights and one of the few that's happened in more recent decades. The 2008 airplane fight. Actually, in the early 2000s, there was a lot of weird stuff going on airplanes. This is the infamous beatdown that Joey Styles gave longtime alleged WWE bully JBL. And this is a review of a Wrestling Observer from around December 9th, 2008. They mention in the story about this incident that during the 2008 Slammies, Joey Style had a big grin on his face, even more than usual, since people backstage were all talking about him kicking JBL's ass. And those Slammies aired on December 8th, 2008. So we can assume that this incident took place a couple days before that. Apparently, it was on the way home from the tribute to the troops overseas show. It seems like these European and overseas events where everyone's on the same plane drinking back in the days where wrestlers were a little bit more rowdy characters in real life, it resulted in some zany antics. So here's the story according to Meltzer's research. And after this, I'm also going to mention a few, two or three people who were on the plane rides version that have come out and shoot interviews since. But Meltzer brings back the big talk coming back from Iraq was the fight involving JBL and Joey Styles, who at this point was not commentating for WWE TV anymore. He was working on WWE's website. Apparently, JBL was pulling what was described as his typical bullying antics, picking on the quote unquote nerdy type Joey Styles and making fun of him. It was the JBL that younger guys feel they have to endure because retaliation will cost them their jobs. And we've heard of JBL doing this to people like Harry Smith, who he did it very publicly to in Toronto, Rene Dupree, Chris Masters, a long list of others, the Dicks. According to one eyewitness, Joey Styles was being bullied by JBL, having drinks poured on him, and he was being called all sorts of names. Then, quote, when JBL turned his back, Joey jumped on him and caught JBL with a punch that gave him a cut under the eye that was bleeding like crazy, end quote. According to another story, JBL had been drinking and made some comments about Joey Styles' family. Styles blew up at him. The whole thing was described as a slow build over several days with lots of verbal taunts. JBL at some point had also poured a bucket of ice on Lillian Garcia as she was sleeping on the airplane. Joey Styles is about 5'7". JBL is about 6'6", former professional and college football player. Meltzer says he doesn't know if Styles still trains or not, but he did lift weights when he was younger. At the TV tapings in Philadelphia after this instance, Styles was something of the conquering hero to some. JBL was quiet, working intently on his BlackBerry. Remember those? And more subdued than usual since he knew a lot of people were talking about the incident. One friend of JBL noted, quote, I'll always shake my head when he lowers himself to these high school spectacles. He's such a smart, funny, engaging person and a good guy at his core, but he's compelled to act in a deplorable manner and it has come back to bite him in the ass, end quote. Meltzer goes on to say JBL was going after Styles physically, and even if he wasn't, he said things that should never have been said and was harassing him during the trip. Styles should not get into any trouble over this. He then speculates that top guys have been able to get away with bullying lower ranked guys for a long time due to fear of the lower ranked guys getting fired if they retaliate. He also goes on to say that in the old days, this was a business of tough guys, but now it's a traveling entertainment business where fans don't even care if the wrestlers are tough or not. I will disagree with that. Maybe some fans don't care and only care about it from a performance quality. But me personally, as a former combat sports athlete myself and an old school fan, if I don't think the wrestlers are tough in real life, even if they're not, if they can't convince me that they're tough in real life, unless of course it's beautiful women wrestling, if it's males, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see something as a performance, but that's just my taste. In recent years, Bruce Pritchard commented on this in his podcast with Conrad Thompson, where they basically said Joey was being picked on the plane, and Joey hit him after some comments were made about his family. And Bruce Pritchard said there was much to do about nothing. Well, it was a guy, in my opinion, that was known as a longtime bully getting his quote-unquote comeuppance, and people are still talking about it 15 years later. And I'm sure it still haunts JBL at this point. And to be honest, it's the only thing Joey Styles is really remembered for in WWE to most fans like me, because hardly anyone watched WWE's ECW version. Shad Gaspard told the best version, and you could search it up on the internet, on YouTube, with, I believe, an Australian YouTuber. And an RIP to Shad Gaspard. I interviewed him a couple of times. Really nice guy. He said JBL started drinking and got drunk as shit, what he described as quote unquote surly. Apparently, Joey Styles went to get up after JBL poured a few beers on him, and then JBL rammed him into the back of his chair violently, and they were separated by Shad, John Cena, and some others. The situation had to be calmed down. Shad then went on to say that Joey was very upset. Him and Cena, again, were calming him down. But then when Cena and Shad got away from Joey, I guess JBL came back around. Joey double-legged him from behind and said, "Come on, motherfucker," quote unquote. Bradshaw then threw a wild hook, and Joey took control and laid a beating on him. Bradshaw fell into the side of the airplane seats, and Joey had to be pulled off. Then Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, former head of talent relations, started yelling at Joey Styles, and Joey Styles said to Johnny Ace, quote unquote, "Fuck that, not today," end quote. And again, Joey Styles is an educated guy. He obviously went on to work outside of wrestling, since we haven't heard about him for years. So clearly, he really didn't care about being bullied. RVD mentioned in a shoot interview that the whole situation seemed to humble JBL, although, of course, he did go on to bully Mauro Ranallo, and there was a huge deal about it, and I believe it played a role in Mauro Ranallo leaving the company. Now back to the December 2008 report. Meltzer went on to reference a few other things. He said a bunch of wrestlers brought up something similar that happened with JBL overseas with Palmer Cannon, the guy who played a UPN network executive on SmackDown. I vaguely remember this. Apparently, the bullying was so bad on this tour, Cannon quit the company and was never seen or heard from again. And that, even to this day, Palmer Cannon has not been seen or heard from today. And I remember trying to get an interview with him a few years ago. Apparently, it wasn't just JBL harassing him. Fit Finlay was also harassing him during that tour, but Finlay was left out of the story. Of course, Meltzer also brought up the more public incident where JBL punched Blue Meanie Shoot during the first ever ECW One Night Stand WWE Battle Royal. And JBL didn't get in any trouble over it. Apparently, the whole situation hurt JBL's aura. The whole situation with Joey Styles, according to Meltzer, hurt JBL's aura as an enforcer, according to many of the wrestlers. Vince apparently hasn't really commented, and no one really knows Vince's feeling on the situation. This is interesting. I never knew this. Dave Meltzer said at one point Batista's push for WWE champion was delayed after Booker T defeated him in a backstage fight, which was well documented, and Booker T even talks about it on this channel. But eventually, of course, that blew over, and Vince changed his mind on it. And of course, Batista had an amazing career. The other thing that Meltzer mentions is JBL had an incident with referee Billy Silverman, who harassed to the point that Silverman quit the company. And of course, the AEW ring announcer, who I forget his name, he also had, at one point, his passport or something was taken by JBL. I forget his name, but in his book, he goes into great detail about that situation. And then the final thing I'll mention that Meltzer brings up in here, where I guess he was speculating that JBL might be released over the, we all know JBL continued on and had a great career. I never really had any bad situations with JBL. Only met him a few times backstage as an extra. I would never have been in his radar because I only met him as an extra. Was never with the company. All I did was shake his hand and stuff. And I know he's given me a few shout outs in his interviews over the years. So his stories are interesting. I find him interesting. That's why I'm reporting on him. But the other interesting story in this that Meltzer goes into describe, and I'd never heard of this before, was as he's talking about how it used to be important to be tough as a wrestler. He brings up that when Bob Backlund first started his career, he got into a bar fight in Bill Watts's territory, and he ended up, according to Meltzer's words, on the wrong end of the fight, and he was told by the other wrestlers he would have to go back in the bar, start the fight over again, and win, or Bill Watts would fire him. And he did do that and won the rematch with the guy in the bar. Kept his job. So there you go. That I'll get into the comments, but that's about it from Meltzer's report from that time. I haven't heard from any of the reports anywhere that, or from any shoot interviews, and I've watched a lot, or anyone talking off the record, anything but Joey Styles got the better of Bradshaw. The brother man says Joey Styles did nothing wrong. Colton says Joey Styles is a great guy. This guy says Joey Styles' catchphrase, "Oh my God." Is there any bullying in wrestling these days? Well, there's always cliques backstage. I doubt there's any physical bullying because you just wouldn't get away with anything like that. I mean, JBL pouring a bucket of ice on Lillian Garcia. I mean, that could you imagine in 2023 any wrestler, or I mean, this was before JBL was champion. Imagine a mid-card wrestler dumping a bucket of ice on Bailey or something while she's sleeping on a plane. Do you think that would, you think the guy would keep his job? I just don't think so. I just think people are more sensitive these days. I know JBL was thinking a lot of this stuff was all in good fun. I don't know if I agree with dumping a bucket of ice on a female wrestler. I could see, like, it's playful antics if you're on a long plane ride to dump a bucket of ice on someone if they're sleeping. That doesn't hurt anyone compared to the story we heard of Dynamite Kid. Greg Valentine told me the story of Dynamite Kid super gluing Outback Jack's hat to his head while he was sleeping, to the point that he ripped out all of his hair from the hat being super glued to his head. That's just crazy. Someone says, such a BS way to conduct business in the past. Someone misses Joey. Yeah, it's too bad they don't use him for anything in any of the companies. I can only assume he doesn't want to. Bill Pierce, former WWE talent who I've interviewed on this channel, says he remembers the British Bulldogs walking around. I think he's talking about Dynamite Kid here, walking around with nothing but his towel over his shoulder with the wardrobe ladies back in the day in the WWE dressing room. Yeah, it was a different climate today, or in the past, for better or worse. There's definitely pros and cons of each, but there's no question the wrestlers breaking in, the new guys, have it a lot easier than back in JBL's day. And Gerald Briscoe did say that JBL didn't do anything without the Undertaker's approval. Gerald Briscoe did say that on this very channel. So I think one of the reasons JBL got away with this stuff is because he had the Undertaker's protection, who was the top guy in the locker room. Mike says it's funny. Yes, I wouldn't agree with Bruce that it's much to do about nothing, because it is kind of the ultimate story of the nerd beating the jock, or the David beating the Goliath, but in real life. But at the same time, it happened again with Morrow, I guess maybe 10 years later, 8 to 10 years later. So once it blew over, I never heard of it happening again with wrestlers, but definitely it happened with Morrow, and anyone that wants to know more about that can just search it up.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news.